All right, it looks like we're live. And I'm just going to do my obligatory intro real quick, and then I'd love to hear, we'll talk to Reggie. We'll have all sorts of conversations and questions. But welcome to the Founder's Mind Live. The Founder's Mind is a podcast powered by the Kadar Group and sponsored by Upside Business Travel. If you're watching live or catch this conversation later, be sure to subscribe on your YouTube channel. Catch us live every Monday at 3 p.m.
Looks like we're live.
Oops.
I'm just going to do my obligatory intro real quick, and then I'd love to hear Reggie. We'll have all sorts of conversations and questions, but welcome to the Founder's
There it is.
Boom.
Sorry.
You got a little echo there, which is cool. But on this conversation, we have Reggie, which is, I think, no better time to intro you, sir. And instead of my words, would love to hear from you. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you're up to, and we'll dig into the conversation. Thanks for joining on the Founder's Mind, Reggie.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I am Reggie Black, multimedia artist, speaker, mental health advocate, lover of hand type and typography, native Washingtonian, product of DCPS, whatever all the titles, I suppose. World traveler, coffee lover, cyclist enthusiast, all those things.
Love it. Thank you so much.
And thanks for having me, man. Yeah, but this is great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you said a lot of things. Native Washingtonian, and I like to be specific. I'm not from DC. I'm from Maryland. Out of respect for people who are actually from DC.
I appreciate it. People get that confused a lot, and then they get mad when the natives put their fist up.
Exactly.
But no, born and raised in Petworth, man.
Yeah.
Native Washingtonian.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I'm really excited about with these live conversations, and one of the reasons why I'm excited to talk to you, is sort of expanding the funnel a little bit. When we talk about the founder's mind, there's stereotypes around founders, like they build software companies, they build high growth companies, but founders create a lot of things. Founders create movements, founders create small businesses, founders are artists, they're technologists, they're futurists, they're your corner store owner, they're all sorts of people.
Absolutely.
And so I would love to hear sort of what top of mind, what are you focusing your energy on these days? Because I know the world has changed almost 2 or 3-fold in the last couple months.
Sure. Want to piggyback on something that you said that was really important. That I agree with you, and I love that you've acknowledged that founders come in all forms. And for me, that seed of what a founder could be was planted when I was very young. Growing up in DC when it was Chocolate City, I lived in a neighborhood that was predominantly all black, and in addition to that, there was all black entrepreneurs in the neighborhood. And what I learned very early is that, I didn't define it until, a couple of years ago, but the idea of a startup is any idea that isn't proven into the world and that you're testing this hypothesis to say, let's go do that. And so I think when you categorize the founder's mind, we automatically think either VC or, to your point, or high tech, but it could be any hypothesis or idea that doesn't live in the world that you want to test to see if it lives in the world.
Right.
And so I think that's where I kind of that's how I got started very early. And for me, founder has been a multitude of things. I launched my first company, 2004, I believe. Yeah, so I launched my first company in 2004. It was called Black Collection. It was a lifestyle and t-shirt brand with my partner, 2 partners, Mike B, shout out to Mike B, and Dylan Chase, shout out to Dylan. And we had that for a very long time, about 7 to 8 years. And
that's good.
Yeah, it was a nice run. And then after that, I think that's when I kind of ventured into art, but my love is business. My background is business. I'm a marketing major, so any marketing case study that you can think of, any company that you can think of, I probably got like a story on how they've arrived. And so that's the abbreviated version of the foundation of being a founder. And then fast forwarding to today, in this present time, my work lands directly in the intersection of art and mental health, vulnerability, transparency, what else? Typography. And then to your point, we got to flip again because the world has completely changed in the last, we were talking early March, I think. Yeah, so we've seen like 2 more flips that have occurred from that. And so now for me, as a black man in this country who is the target market of demise, I have to make sure that I reflect the times. Mm-hmm. And so my work now is trying to find itself, well, for one, I spent a lot of time trying to understand where my work could land and where I could actually fit in and how I can contribute, right? Because there's so many different positions and rooms on the front line of a protest. Like, everybody has a specific role to play. And so it took me a while to, once I had to emotionally inherit what was going on in the world, particularly with men that looked just like me, and feel all of those emotions, then I had to figure out, or had to think about how I can contribute.
Yeah.
And I think now, Adam, my work is, I'm really interested in this intersection, not that I haven't been in all along, but somehow figuring out a way to highlight the importance of mental health, particularly for Black people right now, because I think more than ever, we're going to need the most support. It's like we're dealing with, layers of trauma to begin with, and now we have this new layer of trauma that we have to begin with, that we have to kind of move forward with, and so, I mean, we watched the world, set ablaze. We watched George Floyd be murdered. We watched Ahmaud Arbery be murdered. And then literally, Monday morning, every Black person in this country has to go to work like there's absolutely nothing happening. And so that's a lot to deal with. And so for me, I'm like, all right, like all the things that I do are cool. I know how to create cool content. I know how to make beautifully designed products and prints and merchandise. I know how to craft beautiful experiences. I built a gallery by myself here in DC last year. So I know the experience space, but right now what's important is intention.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm trying to be very strategic and figure out where I fit and how to amplify the voice of mental health, because like I said, now more than ever, we're really going to need it. So that's kind of where it's landing right now.
Yeah, not lighthearted stuff.
Nah, not at all. not at all, man. Not at all. But somebody has to do it, and I think I won't say I have a lot of training, but what I will say, I think what can I say? Just me having a life of putting myself out there. I think that I've been called to do this work, from dealing with my own sobriety and recovering alcoholic, and just all the mental work that I try to do for myself, my family, and try to be as honest to everybody as possible. It comes off very Drake-like sometimes, that's the new word that everyone says, like if you're emotional, and then sometimes I can be a bit extra, but for me, I'm not leaving leaving anything for chance, and I'm going to say exactly what I feel, and
sure.
Whatever happens on the other side, at least I'm not carrying the weight of it. Yeah, but that took me a long time to understand.
No, like you said, it's a journey, and I think just looking at your Instagram feed, and you and I started talking early March, and our first conversations were, and what's the world doing, and how are we going to respond? And I remember that one of the initial conversations, there was this sort of this comment or vision from you about wanting to do something that's bigger, wanting to do something that is sort of beyond just art.
Yeah.
And I don't know the exact timeline. You have a very curated feed, but then you started updating it, with George, Brianna, Ahmaud, those billboards, and then the next set is I think just such a huge statement. Not just read one, but the emotional and mental Bank of America, which is the brand logo, is overdrawn.
Yeah. As you can see, those are the flips, right? I think my Instagram feed, one of the things that I am known for is very empowering, uplifting messages and designs that have this very universal language that connect you and I, because human emotion is colorless and we can all connect, right? And so I know that that's the direction of my work for a very long time. And although that work and that message is important, 300%, I can't continue to push that narrative when I know that there's an underlying narrative of pain and grief in this country that directly affects my community. And so when you see those flips on my Instagram, and then I'll go back to the larger things that you and I had talked about in our first conversation. When you see those flips on my Instagram, that's me literally in real time trying to figure out how to respond to what's going on. And so you see the billboard work, that's just a vision project that I would love to collaborate with an advertising campaign and just plaster every Black and brown person in this country that has been murdered by the injustice of all huge, because we have that blood to see what they're doing to their own.
All right, we have some streaming issues, but we are back, and we'll see how long this lasts. Reggie, you were talking about, collaborating, the flips, but also collaborating with bigger brands or agencies, and that's why you sort of projected those billboards on your IG.
Sure. Yeah. And so that was one attempt, and then the mass manipulation series that I'm actually working on expounding into a larger project. That was kind of my first, to be honest, that was like my first piece of work that I've been able to make during this time of just, a really rough emotional state. Mm-hmm. And the whole notion for that work, rewinding back to my original opening statement, is that, my degree is in marketing. I love branding. I love logos. I love case studies. I love all of those things. But then it's merged and clashed into the hand typography that I've become to develop a unique style for over the years. So mass manipulation is this kind of juxtaposition, but also an intersection of the two languages and the worlds that I come from.
Yeah.
And being very intentional about it, I wanted to play on those logos to make a statement, but too much focus on corporations in America instead of realizing the why or the intentions of the corporations. And then when things do happen to corporations, we never examine the why. Like, people are mad at people for looting Target, but are we looking at the why they're looting Target? Or, we point the finger at Bank of America. We point the finger at people in the street, but the SBA loans that just kind of looted all the funds from small mom and pop businesses, nobody ever questioned that, or Chase or whatever, right? And so that's my whole, I'm somewhere in between that right now, trying to figure out where all that lands, and we'll see where it goes.
Well, I'll tell you one observation that I had, and it kind of resonates with the companies that you selected for that series, at least the part of the series that you shared on
Sure.
Instagram, is when I was driving down Georgia Avenue, so if you're in DC, you know what's up. The businesses that were boarded up were the big corporations. Dunkin' Donuts was boarded up, CVS was boarded up. Not your small shops.
Yeah.
Because they're part of the community. And the people that know them and the people that live here, they're not trying to mess that up. And now that the news shows that there were definitely small businesses that were damaged. There's no question.
Sure.
And especially in areas like Minnesota where there's a lot of pain around recent events.
Sure.
I think that's part of the grief process. But it was interesting, and I had this moment where I was like, they know.
Yeah.
They know that they're not a part of the community.
I mean, one thing's for sure, man, like, people in the communities know what is up, right? And they know the intentions behind things. And I think we do ourselves a disservice to not trust the people that are on the ground, because they know exactly what's happening on a day-to-day basis, which is why there's always a lot of disconnect from corporations trying to translate their message to the everyday consumer, because corporations aren't on the ground to tell that narrative and that language. So, man, it's interesting times. It's an interview about me, but I want to ask, how are you holding up with the flips, with all the flips?
I'll humor that question.
You don't have to answer.
I like it. And I'll tell you why. I think it's good. I prefer a dialogue, and there are a couple layers that I look at.
Yeah.
2020 is not going the way I thought 2020 was going to go, just in general. Like, it's not bad. It's just like it is much different year.
Yeah.
Than I thought. I thought it was just going to be an incremental difference to 2019.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that I've been living at my folks with my family since March 16th.
Okay.
Because we live in an apartment in DC, and the idea of navigating 30 other units and what was going on with COVID was not interesting and not a delightful idea. You know? And so there's that one layer where I'm living in a multi-generational house. I'm living with my folks. I'm in my 30s. I have a kid. I'm married.
Yeah.
And there's another layer that's come up, and you started talking about it, which is like the not just like the exponential amplification of our societal challenge right now with what happened with George Floyd and what happened with Ahmaud and Breonna and even Rayshard. You know, after all of this started. And being on a very different side of the conversation than you, obviously, but it is. I have experienced so much heaviness on what's happening, or at least the sort of incidents that are sparking all of this. And it is an unbelievable reckoning. And so, I think it's safe to say that I've cried more in the last 4 months than I have in the last 4 years.
Me too. Yeah. You know, it's heavy, man.
Yeah, and for different reasons and for similar reasons. And you know, you said something earlier, and I just want to, for people that are listening, and people get into semantics, emotions are colorless, but the differences and challenges based on skin color are not colorless.
Absolutely.
You know, and there's.
See, I think that's something that we're trying to hide under in America. We've always tried to hide under it, right? Like we try to use, you know, the human emotion and universal languages make everything okay, when in fact, whoever you are, it's a completely different experience. You know, love is love, but there's another thing that can affect the way that love is being translated at the time, right? Fear is fear, but there's another level of fear that can be translated of the time. You know, grief is grief, and so we gotta reshape the narrative around how we try to highlight and layer human emotion for human grief. But through and through, you're right, human emotion is colorless, but I think
those are your words. I don't want to take credit for your words.
Human emotion is colorless. I've said that for years, and it's ringing true now. Human emotion is colorless, but I'll add another line to that. Human emotion also has to be time-stamped. Yeah. Because we can't continue to pursue the things that bound us by the human emotion when the world's ablaze. You know, when the world's on fire, and when there's so many social issues that are affecting so many people around this country. And so at that moment, we have to timestamp and almost kind of freeze that human emotion and figure out how we're going to tackle a specific issue that's directly affecting the times right now.
I mean, I completely agree. And then in addition, sort of where my mind goes with this thread is that there's also that groups of people and cultures and societies carry an emotional sort of, there's an emotional layer in there, right? And so if you are a part of a group that is oppressed or disenfranchised, or, you know, I mean, the language of hunted has been used many times recently. But if that's a part of your community experience, there are not unique to the human experience, but there are unique to the time, like you said, timestamp, and certain populations' emotions. Like I am not afraid to walk down the street, and I have no fear of police.
But I do.
Yeah, right. But like you know, so there's this element of like, and that's not a constant fear of mine. You know, like getting in a car isn't a constant fear of mine, except for getting in a car accident. Yeah. You know, but like that part is colorless.
Sure.
You know, like I think that there is this interesting dichotomy of the, like let's just say like the white experience or the white male experience frees me of certain constant emotions, or frees me of certain constant sort of like mental exercises that I don't have to go through.
Sure.
And so there is, I agree at the core about the colorless, because it is true, like, you know, joy and love and the emotions that you've shared. But there's also like, when are those emotions activated, and how in control is someone of those activations?
300%.
You know,
300%. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's kind of not all that. Well, when you see a lot of the messy kind of language that might be trying to articulate a specific thing from you know, a large corporation, or you know, brands trying to get, you know, Black voices to speak up for them, or whatever. Like, it's all messy right now, because I think we're all having a hard time, or maybe just white people are having a hard time understanding, to this point that we're making right now, that the emotion has to be time-stamped right now. Like, there is no time for a universal language. And so I think if we can somehow rhyme and reason that, and bring that together, I think we can figure out a way to not heal this problem, but at least acknowledge it and figure out who's in position and who's in authority to talk about a specific thing for the moment. You know what I mean? Because I couldn't speak on your behalf, and you couldn't speak on my behalf. And so I think that's where we all have to sort of have some level of understanding, you know?
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree. And I think that there's, sort of in that vein, there's this, it's almost like giving people the space. Like, when people were really, like, there was some back and forth, at least at a domestic level, around, oh, there's looting, there's violence, there's things are burning. And, you know, where I sat with that was, you can't tell people how to grieve, because it was grieving.
That's right.
You know, and you can't you can't tell people how to represent themselves if they've complied or abided by the systems, and none of those things are working, you know. And so it is really interesting that things have to be contextualized. Like, when college campuses get burned because a team wins the NCAA title, you know, it's like a raucous party.
Like, everything's on fire.
Yeah, but like, couches are on fire, telephone poles are coming down, and like in 2001, with Maryland, we keep it close. Like, it was essentially rioting. You know, but it was celebratory, and even though it might have been condemned, it wasn't the same. You know,
300%.
And so I think, I think that we do have to give people the space and allow the individuals that need to do the talking, or need to do the emoting, to do that, you know. And I think one of the things that I've seen on social, and we all live in echo chambers, despite our best attempts, you know, there is this, it's time to listen, but it's also time to act from, we'll use a general bucket of allies, right? And explore that, which is...
Well, I think I was talking to a friend of mine on Twitter the other day, and I can't find the tweet specifically, but she had said something. I said, you know, the reason we're here because white people have been lazy and didn't want to address the problems that needed to be fixed. There was something along those lines. It's on my Twitter. I can't remember verbatim. But to your point, I think the allyship and the understanding of it all has to be addressed, to understand how we can actually fix it, instead of trying to talk or trying to get Black people to express and explain the trauma. You know what I mean? It's like, we lost it again?
No, we're good.
Oh, okay. It's you know, it's like, oh, can you explain your trauma to me? And then I also need you to go through it as well. You know what I mean? And it's like, I'm not here. You know what I mean?
I mean, look, I dig it. I mean, and this is for people that are listening, if you're in my demographic, or if you're just outside of the Black experience in the U.S., there's definitely an exhaustion of the experience, but then the re-education. And every time there's an incident, it's like someone else in a circle is leaning on, maybe they have more than one Black friend, but usually a Black friend who's educating a community of people. And that's, like you said, you're reliving a trauma. At one point on social media, I think at least a couple people on my feed were like, stop sending me videos or links or articles about what's happening, because it's all triggering.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
it's thank you for thinking of me, but it's actually a huge trigger.
Sure.
And so I think I'll just put out a recommendation right now for anyone that's listening or asking themselves, well, then what do I do? And Reggie talked about it a little bit. You can go on social media, you can go on Twitter, and just start following Black people or people of color and just some people will talk about it, and then you can learn.
Yeah.
You don't have to ask anyone. You can just straight up read the unofficial history books that are being created on social media. Same on Instagram.
We all have computers in our pockets, man. I think the information is there, and we chase the latest releases of Apple products to where to go for restaurants. Like, the information of the history of this country is there, and once again, to that kind of tagline, that kudos of DCPS, like growing up in school, like that was like the thing here, like, and I'll meet certain people who be like, oh, we didn't even learn about the history of this country. And I'm like, man, like, what school system did you go to? And like, where were you living? And so we got to address what we've been trying to ignore. And then we have to show the empathy to allow, to your point, the people to grieve. It's kind of like trying to tell somebody when they should be over one of their parents dying or something. If you heard that, oh man, like his mom died 10 years ago, he should be over it, right? Like, I've heard that before.
That's crazy.
Which is complete bullshit, but it's that thing that we're going through right now. It's like white people want us to get over slavery and racism, but we're still living in the modern day of it. We just saw what Rashad was a couple days ago.
That was crazy. That was so crazy.
You know what I mean? And so, like, you can't get over something that you're constantly living in.
And did you see? I mean, I was just talking about this with my dad. Did you see the video of Rashad from January, February, talking about being on parole?
I can't watch. Oh, the video when he was giving the interview.
Yeah, not the body cam stuff.
No, I can't watch.
I
can't watch the other. Yes, I did see the video that he was talking about his position in society and how he wanted to. Yeah, that broke my heart, man.
That broke my heart too. And what I would encourage is people should watch that. Just interview, like, just Google Rayshard Brooks parole interview.
That's exactly the one. Yeah,
and
man.
There's a man in that video who's talking about a better society.
Yeah.
And a society that treats people like humans.
Yeah.
And that, like, I saw that and I was already gutted.
Yeah.
The tragedy, but then you get to know someone and this vision, even though maybe in the eyes of the law he's made mistakes and he's been punished for that. It was such a powerful sort of from the grave moment to have that captured.
That's just and that's another, we have to talk about the criminal reform and the prison system in this country too, and the judicial system, right? Like, there's so many layers. That's why I talked about, like, early, like, what position of the protest are you going to assign yourself to and sign up for? Because just as much as we need artists to visually articulate it, we need people in legislation. We need people in criminal reform. We need people to care about, climate change. Like, we need so many things to be addressed and corrected in this country. I hope that this is the revolution that everybody says, you know what, I'm going to pick one fight and try to fight for that. And then if everybody's in a specific lane, let's call them department. If everybody's in a specific lane and a department, you're the Department of Mental Health and you're the Department of Climate Change, right? Like, if everybody finds a specific lane, I think we can find some solid solutions. And it's not going to be overnight, of course. Like, they want us to fix a 400-year problem, in a weekend.
That's
and
what
it's like, come on. You know what I mean?
400 years in the making. Actually, more than that, but if we talk about American history.
Yeah.
And actually, of the things that you can do, a really great one that came up, and I just want to share this with anyone that listens or is watching. A friend of mine, we were talking about elections and the importance of local elections, which a lot of people have been talking about recently. I think Obama's been the loudest voice around the importance of paying attention to your local elections. They decide police chiefs, they decide all sorts of, like, the judges, everything. But a friend of mine said, in addition, if you have decided to be an investor and you invest in the stock market, even if you have a couple shares in a company, or we have a couple of shares in different companies, at least once a quarter, at least once a year, if not, on a quarterly basis, you get an option to vote on different initiatives within the corporation. Does the corporation need to report the demographics of their employees? Do they need to report their equal pay data? And so I think, what do you call them? Retail investors like myself, if I have a couple shares or a couple hundred shares, don't think about that. But we actually, in a lot of cases, have voting rights at companies. And if every individual shareholder did that, you could make some pretty big changes in corporate America.
Yeah. I mean, you think about like how many things that I had a point I'm trying to drive home, but the retail space, like if you look at how many companies are coming out with their diversity reports and their inclusion reports, and it's wild that, to your point, that wasn't considered to begin with. And so that just goes to show you the lack of care of an even playing field in this country. And so on a lot of fronts, and just like some real changes and get to some real solutions.
Yeah, no.
But you can still keep the art, but you have to make sure that you are pushing it in a way that we can have this. That's why I was so grateful for the opportunity, because it's like we're from two sides of the stick, two ends of the world, and to have this conversation, it starts here. To have this one isn't uncomfortable, but to have the have the conversations with people that are from another walk of life, to have this dialogue of understanding, and I think that's what's necessary and needed the most. But everybody has a interest to protect, but none of that really matters right now.
No, and I think, and you mentioned that this one isn't uncomfortable, but I think that's a big piece that I talk about when it comes to privilege. And there's so many different privileges. I mean, we could talk about socioeconomic, we can talk about financial, we could talk about color, gender, all that stuff. But when you're coming from a place of privilege, I think that's one of the biggest pieces that I think about is we have the option to have uncomfortable conversations, but we don't have to have them. And I think that's one of the biggest things that needs to happen is opting into those uncomfortable conversations. Yeah. And this is, for me, this is surface level. But for some people, this could be like already what we've talked about could be like the most uncomfortable possible area to wade into, and so.
But you put yourself in a position to understand and to have the conversations, which is why this one can be surface level. But imagine somebody that has never decided to even talk to a black man before. This is like the scariest thing ever, right?
That's so crazy.
And so that's why I'm glad that I'm here, and I'm glad that we're having this conversation.
People, in an odd way, it feels odd, but it's obvious, but people need to see it and hear it.
Okay, business and this and that, right? Like, did we lose it?
We lost it, but we're back.
Okay, cool. So when we talk about like founders and companies, that's a conversation. But you're here on the podcast, a live podcast, having a conversation of race and justice and indifference. And so I just want to thank you for that.
Yeah, no, I the other day I was having a conversation with someone, and I said, in the startup space or business space, there were really two things that came to my mind is you can't talk about business and not talk about COVID right now because it's intertwined. And this shouldn't have been the situation, but this is where we are now. You can't talk about business and not talk about the inequities in our world. It just shouldn't happen. And so hopefully we're getting pushed into a place where that conversation doesn't go away.
I hope so.
But I think that it's a part of what we need to discuss.
Yeah.
I am wondering, so you mentioned your art, obviously. We talked about your IG a little bit. You also have a design company?
Yeah, so I have a design company, All Things Progressive, where I specialize in creative direction, branding, identities, that I formed, about 2 years ago? Yeah, about 2 years ago. I've had the name I sat on the name for a bit, and then I decided that it needed to be a formal company. To your point, when we talk about a lot of the structures that are in play for any artists that are listening or will listen in the future, what happens is you get to a point where corporations oftentimes they sort of devalue the artists, right? It's just like, oh, you're just coming in here with like a paint overall on, and so they don't think you're about your terms and conditions, as me and my sensei like to call them, right? Like you're not about your terms and conditions, so they look at artists as just like, you know, people that want to play art. And so when you structure your companies and you have, you know, you can be an artist and then form a company and, you know, LLC or whatever, you sole or proprietary, whatever you decide to do. And I think that just lands a little bit of structure to you presenting yourself for larger opportunities, and it puts you in a position to grow. I think design is one of the only industries, it might not be one of the only, but I think it's a good way for you to learn skills for yourself and help other people solve solutions, right? Like, so if you approach me and it's like, hey, Reg, I'm launching a company and I want like a visual identity for it. What that does for me as a designer, it challenges me to think about how can I solve this problem for you? And then what it also does is help me understand new skills, new strategies, new tactics to develop my skill set and have that in my repertoire as well. And so All Things Progressive is essentially the DNA of what births my work, merged with kind of the business savvy and the language and the visual identities of all the things that I like to digest and dig into and talk about. And so working on a few like identities for a few companies right now, startups. And yeah, it's exciting, man. It's a slow drip on that side of the house, particularly because I know that the voice of Reggie Black has to be prevalent right now. Mm-hmm. But I love my company, man. Like it's my baby, man. Yeah, one of my baby.
Yeah, they're actual babies, professional babies, all sorts.
Yeah, all of that stuff, man. Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting highlight. Is this idea of like the creative or the artist and adding the layer of a company or the LLC, not just for external appearances, but also internally. So you can organize how you're approaching your business, and you can organize, well, yeah, what are the different avenues that I can take? I have my, potentially large formats work that, mm-hmm. People put up in their homes, that people collect as art, but there's this bigger thing.
I think one of the things that we initially talked about was my love for figuring out a way to amplify this notion that we're talking about right now, because in art school or in design school, wherever you are, my son was at MICA, so I know firsthand, but even I had friends who went to design schools. There's not a lot of information on how to build a career as an artist. There's a lot of focus on creating and finding your own voice and articulating yourself in a visual representation, but it might not be to your junior, senior year that you get like a general course on how to run a business. And so what happens is that we have a multitude of students graduating every year around this country from expensive ass design schools, right? And then if they come out into the world and they don't land, a gig with Disney, or they're not, they don't find this kind of Elon Musk, idea to turn their art into something, they're stuck with the debt, and then two, they don't even have the framework to understand how to structure a company. And so for me, coming from a business background, I knew very early that in order for Reggie Black to have these different like bifurcated offerings, I had to kind of learn more than just the hand type in the work that I do, but get my skills really aligned with the work that I want to aspire to create. And then to structure have the professionalism so you can uphold yourself in meetings and conversations. Yeah. So that just sets you apart when you're bidding for projects and you're putting in requests for proposals and all the things that commercially helps. And so like a grand scale dream of mine is to build. I was on an interview session the other day with a good friend of mine, and she asked me a question, what would I be doing if racism didn't exist? That was an overall question. Dr. Ayanna Johnson, we were on her living room chats Saturday night. Yeah. And so it was 10 amazing, Black artists and innovators from all different disciplines whose work, they crossed the intersection of X and justice. So there was climate change, there was mental health, there was prison reform, all of these things, right? And my answer, a lot of people, it might surprise, for a lot of people might not, but if it didn't, man, I would be in San Francisco as a venture capitalist with this idea. Like, I just solely want a huge, like, conglomerate or round of funds to really express the importance and birth and invest micro funds, micro investments or large investments. But imagine a school of where artists that had grand ideas can come and get seed funding to articulate their larger visions to the world. Because for creatives, we don't have an idea problem, we have an execution problem. And the execution problem comes from the lack of resources. So you can say, oh, I won't, or campaign, for example. But if I don't know anybody at Outfront Media or some of the other large companies, I either have to bankroll that myself or just hold on to it as a pipe dream. But if you had some information or some resources to bring one connection closer to another, if you could fly to San Francisco and have a conversation with the heads of who has dreams a bit more obtainable. And so I've always been, and it's probably my years of living in New York and having that, we have to extinguish this notion of artists just being this like struggling artist thing, living off ramen and eating sloppy, and like that shit is like, it's the worst thing that we've ever told artists. It thickens your skin, but I think people hold on it for far too long, myself included. And that's when I was like, wait a second, something isn't clicking. And so when you make the shift to kind of get everything in order and take the business side of your work and the commercial side of your work more important, it frees you up to be more creative, because you can't be creative self when you're financially strapped. You're thinking about fight or flight. It's like, oh, I can't buy that fancy marker that I need because that has to go to the eggs from Trader Joe's or Whole Foods or whatever, right? Like, and so, which is why it makes DC makes such an interesting place for creatives to create, because it's so expensive. So you don't have the luxury to say, oh, I have a studio and I have my apartment. You have to choose. You literally have to choose, right? And so, yeah, man, that's my large dream, man. Maybe I'll pack it up and go to San Fran, or somebody will hear this and just give me a huge seed funding to start this VC company that I want to start.
Don't leave.
It's been a dream of mine for I'm just finally starting to talk about it publicly.
All right, well, let's see if we can do anything to keep you here and help you meet your dreams. I'm all about that. I mean, there's so much about what you just said that really resonates with me, but I think one is, there's a question that comes up in coaching, which is, what rules are you following for no reason? And the starving artist kind of sounds like a rule that a lot of people follow, maybe not for no reason, but also maybe for no reason, right? They're like, that's the part of the deal. And so I love you sort of just like poking a hole in it and maybe straight up popping it for some listeners. I got a couple buddies who are muralists and incredible artists, and I'm sending this to them the moment we're done, because I think your mindset is really on point for them. But in addition, like, they've been doing their work for like a decade, and they've found ways to keep going. And one buddy moved to South America, where his family is from, and one buddy has just always kept on pushing and finding gigs and jobs while still being able to create. And I think that this is kind of what you're talking about, right? Like, find ways to sustain and amplify your work. And that flight or fight piece is crazy important. Like, if you're living with that, it's hard for you to do things. And it goes back, and we don't have to do a deep dive into race, but like, that has a big impact on, Black people, Black men, Black women in this country. The realities and the sort of the intergenerational inherited experience creates a mindset that makes it hard to do certain things. Not for everyone, but for a lot of people.
It would have been much easier for me to be able to call my mom and say, hey, I need X amount of dollars to start this thing, instead of 17 years of my wife and I bootstrapping it all, right? Like, it would have been, And that's the disadvantages that we talk about in race, right?
Yeah.
Like for someone that's white or, comes from a wealthier, they can, I have this idea, and mom or dad or an uncle or whoever can just bankroll it.
Yeah.
And it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But for a lot of Black artists in this country and in the world, we have to get through the non-generational financial structure that was not set in place for us. Like, we didn't have any upper hands coming into it, and so for a lot of us, we are the first of that are doing these bold things.
Yeah.
We are the one, the generational curse breakers, if you will. And so it all ties together, man. But that's why I think it's important, because if artists don't have people in place that look like them, you'll get the music industry all over again.
Yeah.
And that was a whole system that was designed to take advantage of young Black hip hop culture and young artists in these like horrible deals. And I mean, we're seeing the shift in indie representation now, but the music industry is a perfect example of how, and I'm a huge like music hip hop fan, like from the day and through. But that's what you'll get. You'll get a lot of artists who sign deals who are taken advantage of, and they're 20 years later and they still don't even own anything. They don't own their rights to the masters. They don't own their publishing. Yeah. They don't own anything. And so I would love to stop that for artists,
Chance raps about it. He says, if one more label tries to stop me, and then he says some things I can't say.
I think Chance was like, maybe Chance was the first public example we saw. He talked about how he went to meetings and his dad was just like, listen, don't sign anything. I don't care what they offer you. Actually, I take that back. Master P was the first. And what we saw during my No Limit record loving days, Master P took a meeting and the exec somewhere offered him $1 million. He talks about it on Solange's new album or second album, the one that he narrates. And he talks about how a music exec wanted to give him $1 million. And he knew if he was just ready to write him $1 million check right then and there, he had to be worth 10, 20 times more.
Yeah, of course. Minimum.
And so, you know what I mean? And so that's, my teachers are hip hop moguls. My teachers are my uncles. My teachers are the guys in the community that put their arms around me and took care of me growing up, who all had business minds. And so as a combination of that, and then going off and living in Southeast Asia and learning a lot about design and being mentored by people there, and all of these experiences kind of make me who I am right now. But the through and through bread line is, how do we make a way for ourselves? Because, although I love the stability of corporations, because I understand that entrepreneurship isn't for everybody, but for me and the path that I want to charter and lead throughout my life, as messy as it is and as uncomfortable as it is and as, win or lose as it is, sometimes I don't know if I'll have it any other way.
I mean, when the system isn't built for you, if you have the energy or mindset, you got to build the new system.
Exactly.
And there's a lot of resilience. Yeah. There's a lot of incredible core competencies for leadership and entrepreneurship in any demographic that is underserved or just like the antithesis of served, oppressed, right?
Absolutely.
And you see it in the Black community, and you see it in the Latinx community. The sort of the highest number of new businesses are coming from those demographics, because there aren't businesses that serve them.
The dudes on the street would make brilliant executives, dude. Like like the people that I know. Some people that I know, and just a whole another world that we don't have to name, but that world is the bread line and the cornerstone of what business is. Unfortunately, it's not accepted in this country if it's not regulated by the government.
Yeah.
However, the principles that it takes to do what those guys do, I mean, they run circles around executives, man. So like that. Once again, those are the intersections that make me.
Well, this is, I don't know what number of conversation this is for us, but it's becoming clear that maybe the future paths are getting closer and closer and closer.
Sure.
And I've really enjoyed having you on the show and learning from you as always, and hearing your perspective. For people that are listening, what's a good way to follow you, check out your work? Where do you want to point people?
So I think the best platform to follow is Instagram. I am Reggie Black. It's the most livable representation of what I'm up to at the moment. I've gotten back into Twitter, which also is I am Reggie Black. My website, IamReggieBlack.com. Those are the three locations that you can find me and my work and what I'm up to. And then if you can't find me, find another Black artist to follow and support, right? Like, so if you can't find I am Reggie Black, go on the internet and look for emerging Black artists on Instagram and follow and support them too, because I think it's not all about me, it's bigger than me. I'm just a part of, I'm fortunate enough to understand that I'm in a position that so many people want to be in. And so for me, calling out and shouting out the things and the responsibility that I have. So if you can't follow me, follow another Black artist and support their work too.
I think that's great. And I would say, if you don't know where to start. I was going to say, I think that's a great recommendation. If, not just following Reggie Black, but if you find other Black artists, and if you don't know where to start, something that I did in the beginning when I was looking for people online to listen to and pay attention to, is when you find one person, just see who they follow. And kind of quickly you'll start going this rabbit hole of expanding your perspective and the sort of feed of information that you're getting. Well, Reggie, thank you so much for being on the show.
So many beautiful narratives in our culture, man. I want the world to see it. Thank you, brother. I appreciate you, man. And we're getting closer. So I think the next time we'll talk, we'll be in San Francisco together or something. I don't know.
Don't tell Erica. Thanks for listening.
Pleasure, brother.